Alright, so with the podcast today, we are simply going to be converting from parts into moles or moles into parts. Alright? So, from really our notes today, we learned that 1 mole equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. I'm just going to call them particles. Alright, there's several different particles we can have. Depending on what type of thing we're talking about. If we're talking about an element, we have atoms. If we're talking about a molecular compound or covalent compound, we have molecules. If we're talking about an ionic compound, we have formula units. But all those things are known as particles. Alright? So, we can make a relationship out of this, or this is a relationship, and we can make 2 mathematical functions out of this. We can either divide both sides by a mole. Alright, and this is kind of what we did last week with unit conversions. And we find that 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles divided by a mole is really the same as 1. And if we multiply anything by 1, we get the same thing, but we can change our units. Conversely, we can also divide both sides by 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles. So I'm just going to go over here and say, or we could divide both sides, instead of dividing by a mole, divide both sides by 6.02. So if that's the case, this side would become 1, and over here we'd have 1 mole divided by 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles is also 1. Alright? So we're going to have a couple examples, because there's 2 ways this can go. So I might say, how many moles are, let's just do a big number, 9.84 times 10 to the 24th particles. Alright? So if that's the case, and we think back in terms of unit conversions last week, there's 2 things we have to do. Start with what you know, and then let your units be your guide. Okay? So, do we know how many moles we have? No, we don't. That's our unknown. Do we know how many particles we have? Sure. We have 9.84 times 10 to the 24th particles. Alright? So that is what we're starting with. So I'm going to simply do my Fencing rail right here. Alright? Now we're going to let our units be our guide. So what is our unit in the top left? It is particles, which means what unit has to be in the bottom right? Particles. Alright, and what do we want to determine? We want to determine moles, correct? So do particles relate to moles? And the answer is yes, they do. Alright, and how do we know that? Because we have 2 choices up here. Alright, we have either choice A or we have choice B. Alright, one of these has particles in the denominator and moles in the numerator. Okay, so which one is it? It is the one on the right. So what I'm going to do, if I have moles on top and particles on bottom, I'm simply going to put the numbers represented in this relationship in front of them. So in front of moles I have 1, and in front of particles I have 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Alright? So that is essentially going to equal, we're going to multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and simplify. So if I do that, on the numerator, I'm going to get 9.84 times 10 to the 24th. And then here it's going to be tricky because I have particle moles. So I'm going to abbreviate a little bit. Particles times moles. And in the denominator, I have 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles. Alright, and what do we notice? We have particles in the numerator, we also have particles in the denominator, so they're going to cancel. What is my unit left? It's going to be moles, which is, yay, what I want. So we simply need to, that's kind of funny, we simply need to simplify the fraction that we're left with over here. Alright? And this is where it becomes uber important that you put this in your calculator correctly. Alright? So the way I would like you to put this in your calculator, I'm just going to show you what you should type, is you're going to type 9.84, and then when you do times 10 to the 24th. So in your calculator, you're going to want to hit the second button, which is kind of over there at the top left, and then you want to hit the comma button, which is right above the number 7. Alright? And what these two should look like on your calculator is the capital letter E, and it's kind of small. Okay, and E means times 10 to the. So then after that, 9.84 second comma, you're simply going to type 24. Okay? And what do we want to do with that number? We want to divide it by 6.02. And then we're going to do second comma again. So second function comma, which is right above number 7. What is that going to look like here? Calculator on the screen, it's going to look like a little E. And we're going to do 23. Alright? And once you do that, you should get this answer. 16.3. Alright, we've already determined our unit is moles. Alright, so final answer. Alright, the other way we can do this is, I might want to know the particles. Alright, so how many particles are in, let's say we had 112 moles of something. Alright, so we are wanting to go from one unit to another unit. We want to go from moles to particles. If that's the case, we need to ask ourselves 2 questions. Start with what you know, and let your units be your guide. So in this case, moles, we're going to have moles in the numerator, so moles has to be in the denominator. And we want to go to particles. Alright? So again, kind of like in our previous example, if we have particles in the numerator and moles in the denominator, we have 2 choices. We either have choice A, alright, which is this choice in red, or we have choice B, which is in blue. Well, we have found that if we have particles on top, we need to put the value 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd in front of particles. It is the number that will always go in front of particles. Alright? What's going to go in front of moles? It's going to be 1. Alright, so now, in this case, we're going to simply multiply across the top, alright, and divide by, oh yay, lucky us, 1. So I'm just going to put 1 moles down on the bottom. Okay, it's kind of funny to put moles when there's a 1 in front of it. What's our unit going to be at the top? We're going to have moles times particles. I'm just going to put this here real quick. We're going to do our math at the end this time. So notice we have moles on top, we have moles on bottom, so they cancel each other out, and we are left with particles, which is, yay, what we want. So really all we're doing is multiplying across the top. Okay? So in your calculator you're going to multiply these 2 things, you should get this answer, which is 6.74 times 10 to the 25th particles. Alright? Your calculator might end up putting out an answer that looks like this. It'll probably say 6.74, a little e. And that capital E just means times 10 to the. Alright? So we just expand that when we write it out longhand, times 10, and then we're going to raise that 25 as an exponent. And that is converting moles to particles or particles to moles using Avogadro's number to do so.